So the first order of business today is to welcome our first keynote speaker. It is a great privilege and a special, special, special day for me. I've known this guest speaker for 44 years. So yes, students, that means that Miss Wrightson is older than 44. I've known this person for 44 years, and I could tell you thousands and thousands and thousands of stories about her as a child, as a middle school student, as a high school student. We won't talk about cheerleading at all. I could also tell you many stories about her as an adult. This person is my sister, and I have a great privilege in inviting her here today. She's traveled a long distance from London in the United Kingdom to be with us today. She has a long career in software development, software engineering, as well as in business administration and management. Her bachelor's degree comes from the Northwestern University in the great city of Chicago. Go Chicago, woohoo! She's also spent time taking courses at the London School of Business. She's spent time working in the multinational corporate world for companies such as Sun Microsystems. She spent a decade working for a software development company called ThoughtWorks, where she held many different roles within this multinational software development company. And she still serves as an advisor for this company and does work for them all over the world. She spent the last 5 years of her career working as an entrepreneur after leaving the corporate world, and she's developed a couple of different businesses, got investors, sold some of them off, still very much involved in a business of her own, an entrepreneurship called IUTA Heuristics, which you'll hear about today, I'm sure. She's a great design thinker. I think of our design teachers, our design students, and our design staffs when I think of my sister. She's great with design thinking. She understands the design cycle really well, and she's really good at helping you apply what you've learned in science, math, design, art, other areas of your life, the STEM and the STEAM, to what it is that you want to do for your future. As well, my sister's such a fabulous person. She's got a really strong faith base, and she trusts God's hands in her life. Trusts God that He'll grow her with her talents and her gifts, of which she has many. Her goal is the betterment of humanity and the betterment of the world as a whole. She uses her career to do just that. So I'd like to welcome today my sister, Miss Cyndi Mitchell. Welcome.
Thank you. Oh, cool, good. Thank you, Barbara. Wow, it's kind of weird to hear your sister talking about you like that. So that's really nice. Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Cool, good. So good morning. I'm Cyndi, and it's very nice to be here today. I grew up on a farm in the middle of Nebraska, which is right in the middle of the United States. So this is a long way away from home for me. I moved to Chicago, as Barb said, and did my bachelor's degree there. And then kind of moved around quite a bit in the world, ended up in London, and that's been my home for 17 years. This picture that you see here is from the Portobello Road in London, if anyone's been there, and it's right near my house in London. It's a place where you can go shopping for all kinds of antiques and fashions and cool things like that. So, and I'll share a few more photos of London as we go throughout the talk and the presentation today. So I learned about the talk, or about the theme, rather, for your career day, and I kind of thought to myself, initiate your future. That's an interesting one, and it's certainly something that I thought a lot about at your age. I had the idea that I wanted to get out there and make things happen and be bold and be brave and do big things. But I think that now that I'm 44, as Barb's given away my age, I kind of am more drawn, I guess, to the message in the middle of this sentence, to this word here, this word your. To initiate your future. You don't initiate someone else's future, you initiate your future. And if you're going to do that well, you actually have to know a bit about who you actually are, not who the people sitting next to you are, not who people outside this room are, but you, yourself. And so I wonder how many people in this room today have actually asked themselves that question of who am I? Who am I actually? You know, we can all think of things about, when we think about who we are, we might think of, oh, I like to wear skinny jeans, and I like pizza, and I like going for long walks on Saturday afternoon, or my favorite movie is Star Wars. So we think of these things that we think kind of make up who we are. But I think those are really more things that describe who we are. And this question of who we are is actually a much harder one to answer. And I'll admit that really for the first many years of my life, 40 years probably of my life, I actually didn't really think very hard about who I was. I spent a lot of time looking around the environment and looking at what behaviors I needed to exhibit to be successful in that environment. So who did other people want me to be? How were other people being? That's who I was. I wanted to be the successful person in every room that I was in. And so I looked around and saw what would make success. And I did those things. I became those things. So, for example, when I was your age, I went to a rural high school with Barbara, and it was important there to be well liked, and so I focused a lot on how to be popular in that school. I wanted to be popular, and to be popular, you needed to be nice, and so I learned to be nice so that I could be popular, and I became the homecoming queen, and I became the valedictorian of my class, and that worked out well. I got lots of reinforcement for that. It was also important to be good at academics where I came from, so being smart, getting good grades, and so I focused on that, and I worked really hard at that. I became the valedictorian of my class, and I went on to go to a great university. Also, where I came from, it was a very libertarian place, so it was important to be independent, to not be a burden on anybody, to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and not need to take things from other people. And so that was a big focus for me, was to be independent, and I thought that was a really important part of who I was. And then, of course, I went on to go to, I skipped, could be good at sports. That's the most important thing where I come from. In the Midwest, you must be good at sports. And so I spent a lot of time volleyball. So there must be some Midwesterners here as well, yeah. So I spent a lot of time in volleyball and basketball. And yes, I was a cheerleader, but as Barbara mentioned as well. So basically, then I went to university, and the main focus for me at university was, what should I study to get a good job? I gotta pick engineering or pick something kind of hardcore that I know I'm gonna get a good job when I get out of school. And so I geared my learning around getting a good job. And to me, getting a good job was primarily making money. So how could I make money so that I could be independent, so that I could stand on my own 2 feet? And I spent probably the first 7 or 8, all of my university and first 7 or 8 years of my career really focused on these things. How can I get a good job? How can I make money? How can I get another good job and make more money, and kind of keep running on that? And then I got interested, so that was all kind of engineering-focused work that I did. And then I got interested in leadership, and I became the managing director of a technology business. And so it meant that I had a broader base of responsibility rather than just focusing on software development and product development. And the first thing I learned when I went into leadership is that you need to be authentic. So I had all these employees and bosses, and the first thing they said was just be genuine, be yourself, show up as who you are. And so I learned to be authentic, and I felt, yeah, okay, that's who I am now. I'm authentic, plus I'm all of these other things. And then I also learned that people want you to look like you're in charge when you're in leadership, and so you should be commanding and show up and stand like this. And I learned all these different poses, so I looked like I was in charge and I was commanding. But then I also learned that people wanted me to be caring, to be warm, to see them as they are and know them as an individual. And so I had, by this time, thousands of employees, and I worked really hard to make sure that I knew everyone's names, and I spoke to them individually and knew what was going on in their lives. And that made me more successful as a leader. And I also learned that I needed to be unbreakable. So when they're, in business, you have lots of up and downs. You take bets on things that they don't quite work out. And you need to kind of make it look like, oh, it's okay. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry. It's under control. So I learned to be somebody who was unbreakable as well, who just looked really, like nothing was going to be a problem. It's all going to be fine. And so after years and years of doing these things, basically, I ended up being ultimately who I thought I was, which was a successful businesswoman. I kind of felt like that was sort of the direction of my life. That's what I should be. And I spent a lot of time reinforcing that image with people around me. So I became known in all the circles that I was in as someone who was a successful businesswoman. And so I worked harder and harder to be a successful businesswoman and to feed that image and to make people see that. And you can look at those things and you can sort of think, actually, it's not a bad list of things. These may be things that some of you guys are, actually, or maybe some things that you aspire to be anyway. But, after about 40 years of doing that, I actually got really tired. I became really, really tired of trying to look at everyone in the room and try to be what they needed me to be, and to not having this clear sense of centeredness and who I actually was. So I felt tired, and I felt kind of empty. And I started asking these questions of myself. I was like, what's the point here? I've kind of carried on. I got bigger and bigger jobs. I made more and more money. I had more and more responsibility, bigger and bigger successes. But like, where is this all going, and what is the point? And I started to ask myself these questions. And quite surprisingly, actually, I found the answer in Jesus. And that was a real surprise to me. You know, I had grown up in a Christian home. I went to church every Sunday. I obviously knew who Jesus was. I had the idea that you were supposed to be nice and be kind and be like Jesus, and don't worry, you're going to go to heaven. I kind of had all of these notions in my head, but I never really understood that Jesus is actually a living God, a God who actually wants to be in a relationship with us, who actually wants to and knows every hair on your head and every little detail of your body and your mind and your heart, and that he's there and wants to be in a relationship with us. And then the moment that I realized that, actually, and I invited Jesus into my life, I gave my life to Jesus, I had this feeling that someone knew everything about me. And it was just like this feeling that came over me in my body, and I was like, wow. That's so amazing that there is an absolute truth about me. And it's not coming from the people around me. It's not coming from my head and what I think. It actually is coming from a much higher power. And it has nothing to do with how successful I am or how successful other people think I am. There is a higher power, and only God knows the truth about me. And the truth about me is really, really, very simple, actually. And it's kind of a funny one to be learning at the age of 42, which is what I was, that I'm a child of God. And as a child of God, I actually don't have to worry about what anyone thinks. I can go to God every day, every minute of every hour, and I can ask him, what is the truth about me? Who am I really? What am I here to be doing? What is the plan? And what do you want from me? And from that point on, things just got lots easier, actually. I just kind of accepted that I wasn't in control, and I got a lot less tired. And as God does, he put people into my life that helped me to see more and more who I am. One of the first things he revealed to me was that he was proud of me. He was proud of the things that I had achieved, but that he wanted more from me. He wanted me to be using a broader set of all of the gifts and the talents that I've been given by him. And so at that time, what happened was a young woman who had worked for me for about 8 years in my company. She's a robotics engineer, so she does machine learning and artificial intelligence, control systems engineering. And she approached me, and she was a mentee of mine for many years, and she said she's been living with diabetes for 23 years. And she said to me, I'm getting ready to quit ThoughtWorks, which is the name of the company that we both worked for. And I'm going to set up a business. I've been living with diabetes for 23 years. I have a vision for something that I think can actually make a huge difference to my own life and all of the people's lives who are living with diabetes. So at the time, I didn't know anything about diabetes, actually. I knew Isabella, so this is the woman, and I knew she was brilliant, and I knew that God had been asking me to be more, to use more of the skills and the breadth that I had. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. Let's have a talk about this. And so I started to learn a lot about diabetes and learn a lot about how it could potentially be addressed very differently than the way it's addressed now. And there are about 415 million people in the world living with diabetes. And it's a disease that is not in any way understood. So it's a disease that affects the human metabolism. And so those of you that have studied your science, you'll know that the human metabolism is what's responsible for the way that we digest our food. So when we eat, our bodies take our food and turn it into glucose and push the glucose into the bloodstream, and then the bloodstream carries it around to all the tissues and the organs that need it. And this is the basic way that our bodies get energy. And it's happening whether we're sleeping, whether we're running a marathon. It's the basic way that we kind of stay alive. And that's a very high-level description of the metabolism. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm not used to the dryness. London's a very damp place. So underneath the covers, this is what the metabolism looks like. It's a long-running set of chain reactions across many hormones, tissues, and organs, and everything we do affects it, and no one fully understands it. So we don't understand it in a healthy body that doesn't have diabetes. And if you do have diabetes, something or many things along this chain are broken. And we don't know exactly what's broken. We don't know how many things are broken, but it's broken. And because we know so little about the human metabolism and so little about diabetes, we have these only very crude and rudimentary treatments for it. So you get this drugs, diet, and exercise type regime if you're somebody who gets diagnosed. And then you have to figure out every day, day in and day out, hundreds of times a day, how to map that treatment onto the condition that you actually have. So no doctor can tell you how much insulin to take, how much exercise to do, what to eat. You personally have to figure it out on your own. And this is an incredible cognitive and psychological burden for anyone who is living with diabetes. This is a very difficult disease to manage. And so what we do, and really if you look at research and developments in treatment and cure of diabetes, since about the last 100 years, there's been very little in the way of major breakthroughs. So insulin was invented in 1921, which is the major drug used to treat diabetes. And since then, there's been these little incremental improvements, but really not much in the way of improvement. So a significant breakthrough in thinking is needed in this area. And so what we do basically is we take data from people's diabetes devices, so their blood glucose meters and their measurements and their pumps. We take data from wearable sensors, so things that they might be wearing on their body that would measure their activity, their body temperature, their blood volume pulse, their electrodermal activity, which gives a sense of their stress levels. And we basically take all that data and we use artificial intelligence to correlate it with changes in blood glucose, so we can actually observe each individual as they're treating themselves and understanding their own disease and their own condition. And we can take it over and put it onto a smartphone. So the smartphone can say, hey, you're on your way to a stressful meeting, you're going to need a unit of insulin, take a unit of insulin now. And so this is a complete breakthrough in thinking and approach. With it, we can actually take away, learn what people are doing and take away the psychological burden, but then we can also take what we learn and contribute it back to science as new knowledge, as some of the missing links in the things that we don't understand about the human metabolism and diabetes. So this is a massive, massive undertaking, and this is at least a 10-year mission. When I look at it, I guess let's go back to what does this mean? What is it? What does this have to do with the truth, which was kind of my opening topic here. And for me, it wouldn't be possible for me to do this business without knowing the truth about myself. I can't, what we're doing is incredibly radical relative to what the industry thinks about diabetes and thinks about how to approach problems like this. It's spanning science and engineering and design and bringing all these things together to make a mobile app that actually integrates with an individual human being's life and learns what they do and takes on what they do for them and takes it over for them, and then contributes back to the pool of understanding in the life sciences world. So it's a massive, massive undertaking. And I think pretty much every day since we've started this, which was about 2 years ago, someone has told me it's not going to work. You're never going to do it. You're never going to get there. You personally, Cyndi, you're not a medical doctor. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know anything about life sciences, which is the whole industry sector that we work in. What do you know about getting a medical device to market? It's a regulated medical device, so it has to go through the FDA and the MHRA, the regulatory bodies around the world. How are you? I mean, you're just not going to be able to achieve this. What are you doing? And so for me, actually, it's been very interesting to know that I have a truth, actually, that I actually don't have to listen to all these things. I can just go to God and I can say, so-and-so says this is impossible. Is it possible? Is that the truth about me? Is it true that I can't found and run a diabetes technology business that turns the world on its head as far as it thinks about diabetes? Is that true, God? And he can tell me, and I don't actually have to listen to any of these people and any of the kind of the resistance and the structure. I can just go to God, and he can steer me and guide me and affirm me and correct me when I need to be corrected. But I don't need to worry about all these voices coming from all these different directions. And that's really been a major, major source of freedom and sense of wonder in my life that I've never really experienced in my career before, in my life and work before. And so it's something that I'm very, very grateful for. And so for me, I always go back to the truth. I always go back and ask God, is it true? Is it true? And ask him to reveal more and more of who I am every day. And so with that freedom, actually, we actually get to a new place. And that's, for me, for the place of courage. I think we've all been given unique gifts and talents, things to give to the world. And I guess I just wonder how many of us actually have the courage to go out there and live fully self-expressed in all the gifts and the talents that we've been given by our Creator. So I spent the first most of my life really walking this line, like most people. I started my career in the lower left, and I was an engineer, a software engineer, and then I became a senior software engineer, and then I became a software architect, a senior architect, and then I became more of a client partner, client management person, and then I became the director of operations, and then I became the managing director, then I became the managing director of a bigger business, and the managing director of a bigger business. So I grew in responsibility and money, and I kind of, walked this line quite successfully. And some of you may look at this, most people look at this and say, actually, not too bad, right? It makes a lot of sense. You kind of walk a line, and you each step on the line kind of gives you the so-called confidence to take the next step, and then you do good at that step, and then you take the next step. And maybe that's okay. I actually think this is not okay. I think this is a bad line for all of us, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is. I spent a lot of time in the last maybe 5 or 6 years really looking at what is it that gives us breakthroughs in life and in our work, and I think one of the biggest barriers for all of us, actually, resistors to having breakthroughs in our lives, is this notion that we need to feel confident in order to do something. So the idea that, I'll take the first step, and I'll get good at that, and then that'll give me the confidence to do the next step, and then I'll get good at that, and then I'll do the next step, and I'll get the confidence to move to the next step, and we just keep going. I think this kind of linear thinking is a big misdirection for us, actually. I don't think it serves us very well. And so, when I go back and look at, I actually had the pleasure of working with a wonderful mentor, a woman called Barbara Fittipaldi in the US. About 4 or 5 years ago, she asked me to look back over my career and point to the real breakthrough moments. So when were the moments where you just felt, man, you just completely busted out of the mold and you became just a totally different person than you thought you were. You did something you totally thought you were incapable of, that it was so out of reach. And sadly, over, about a 15-year career at that time, I could really only think of one time. And that was this time. This is New York City. So I was living in Chicago, which is a great city, but it's a second city to New York. And so I was about 24 years old, and I got the opportunity to go to New York and interview for a dream job with my dream company. It was called Sun Microsystems. And try out my skills on kind of the big world stage. And so I got on a plane and flew out there. I had not enough money, barely could fund the plane ride. And I got there, and I was interviewed for an entire day. I must have seen about 15 people in that same day, and I was totally underqualified for this job. I had I had some of the basic skills, the thinking skills, the learning skills, but I definitely didn't have the coding skills. So Sun at the time was rolling out a new technology platform called Java, which was an exciting development in platform independent computing at the time. And it's now old school, and none of you will probably ever program in Java, but at the time it was a very big deal. And so, but I didn't know much about it. I didn't know much about object-oriented programming, and so I was completely out of reach. So, but I thought, I'm going to New York. I'm going to see what happens. And I ended up, after this day of interviewing, at the end, the guy who became my boss, I said, okay, you can work here. And so I got this job, and I went home and packed everything up and came in and moved to New York and lived in this tiny little room that was barely big enough to turn around in. The bathtub was in the middle of the room, not like there wasn't a separate bathroom. It was, if anyone's been to New York, you know what that's like. I proceeded to go and work on Wall Street building systems in this new technology Java with people who were like 15 and 20 years my senior. So these were very experienced, very talented engineers. And I was barely able to keep up. I was just running every day. I was taking on jobs like programming tasks that I had no idea how I would get done. I went home at night, I sat in my tiny little flat, ordered takeaway, sat there and coded and just really tried to learn as much as I could so that the next day I could go in and take on the next job and get it done. So completely out of my depth. But when I look back on that time, I just think, man, that was just such an amazing time of growth and development and learning and self-expression for me, because I had just put myself out there and done something totally crazy, which in the end actually ended up being super fun and just incredibly rewarding. But when I look back on that, I think, like, did I feel confident when I was doing that? Like, did I feel like, oh man, I'm so confident? No. I was scared out of my mind most days, actually. I was absolutely scared out of my mind that I would not be able to do the next day's work every day for at least a year. But somehow, it wasn't confidence. Somehow I had the courage to step off that line, actually. Somehow my 24, 25-year-old mind said, oh, just go do it. Just who cares? What's going to happen? What could possibly go wrong? And I just did it. And it was just an amazing, incredible, rewarding experience for me. And then, unfortunately, I guess I became quite successful doing that, and that was then a stepping stone for me to take on more and more engineering jobs and architecture jobs, and went on to have a really fun and exciting career. But I guess since then, if I look back really now today, I think I've now taken another step off this line. So going and starting Iuta Heuristics, my company that's focused on diabetes, going into a space that I knew very little about when I started, bridging all of these different areas, building something interdisciplinary that spans science and engineering and design and really makes a difference in human beings' lives has been, a step off that line for me. So I guess for you guys today, I want to challenge you to think about what is off that line for you. Don't wait for the confidence. Don't sit around and wait for confidence to go and do something. Find out the truth about who you are. God knows the truth about who you are. Find out the truth about who you are and get off this line. Have the courage to step off this line. And when you do, I can guarantee you that you will feel and find full self-expression of everything that you've been given, all of your creativity. And most people think they're not creative. And the older we get, I think the more and more we feed this myth that we're not creative. But we all have wonderful creative skills, creative juice, creative energy, and we should be bringing it to every aspect of our lives and our work. You will find the opportunity to make mistakes, actually, which is something I think a lot of us are afraid of. But I can tell you, since I started stepping on this line, and daily I'm making mistakes, and daily I'm learning from those. And guess what else I learned? I've learned to actually let go of that. So if you're not walking on that line, it's okay, because I don't need to get to the next step and the next step. I can make mistakes. I can let go of the idea that I'm actually in control of anything, really, and just go out there and make things happen. And with that comes a tremendous amount of joy in my whole life of being fully self-expressed. And so, I hope for you, and I think for you that you'll find the same thing if you find the courage to figure out who you are and really get off this line, to not wait for the confidence to do that. And then my last point here, and I'll make it quickly because I can see I'm out of time, is this point about love. So we've talked about truth, we've talked about courage. I want to talk about love just for a minute. I believe that God created us to love Him, and to love us rather, and for us to love Him back. So we are the creative objects of God's love, and that love is so huge that it flows over into every aspect of our lives. And if we say our primary purpose on this planet is to live in love with God first and in love with each other second, that doesn't change just because we go to work. And I think sometimes we get in this mindset of like, okay, I'm going to go to work now, so I'm going to put on my work face, and I'm going to be tough, and I'm going to be serious, and we leave all these notion of love behind. But I think that's wrong, actually, in my experience, since I've really learned about truth about love, since living in relationship with God. I bring it to just absolutely every meeting, every conversation, every difficult situation, every easy situation. When I sit with an investor and present my business and he's grumpy and telling me why it's not going to work, I just bring love to the conversation, actually. And it just makes such a massive difference. I think some of the best, the strongest relationships and most significant relationships many of us will have in our lives will be with our colleagues at work, will be with people that we work with. And so we need to step forward and just fill those relationships with love. Fill every room that you're in with love, no matter how difficult the situation is. And I can guarantee you, you will find a lot more success in your life if you do that. And so that was my last point, really. And so I'll just kind of summarize. These are the three things, if I think back over 44 years, thank you, Barbara, that have really made all the difference for me in my career. Knowing the truth about who I am, having access to that on a daily basis through my relationship with God. Stopping with this notion of I need to be confident. So don't wait for confidence, to be filled with confidence before I do something. And then just taking every action in every situation through from the place of love. So thank you. I wish you all a good day today and good luck in your careers.